about emotional intelligence, what is and mostly what is not. So we need to learn what emotional intelligence is not. Sometimes it's easier to learn by what should be when we know what shouldn't be. Why? Because growing up as kids, we were told, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. So we learn what not to do, and we have an automated mechanism by which we learn. We are conditioned to learn by what not to do. So we're going to talk a little bit on what emotional intelligence is supposed to be, but also we're going to touch up today on what is not emotional intelligence and how this affects and diminishes your elevating your emotional intelligence. Randy, you want to add something?
Well, I think it's a good topic. Emotional intelligence is a hot topic, and it's it it's applicable across. It's not a mental health. It's not a behavioral health topic. It's really applicable across a lot of life.
Yes, yes, you are correct. And emotional intelligence has become a requirement. And it's interesting to know that most employers, if they are to employ you, they're going to evaluate your emotional intelligence skills and level before they're going to evaluate your skills. Why? Because we need to get along. Life is hard. We have so many difficulties encountering in life. And later on, there is so much hatred and violence that's spread in United States, and that cannot stand. So to some effect, seeing the hatred and the violence that we are experiencing in USA, well, I'm sure in other countries as well, but I'm only going to speak about USA. Um, it directly shows us what is not, how we are not supposed to behave, what we don't want to have, and what not to do. Um, and one of the one of the things that is going to suppress your emotional intelligence is and is going to deter your developing emotional intelligence skills is when you suppress your curiosity, when you are inquisitive and question things. I mean, not question about everything. Where have you been for the past 20 years? I haven't seen you here lately. Well, so, but um, when we suppress being inquisitive and when we suppress questioning the right questions. How does it work? You know, the most important question you will ever ask in your life is, how does it work? Because everything has a process to it, right? And emotional intelligence has a process to it, and it has a way of working. So how does it work? So today we're going to talk about how what is going to deter and impede the progression of emotional intelligence. So when you suppress inquisitiveness and good questioning, um, this is going to discourage open exploration and self-reflection. And self-reflection is one of the key ingredients to elevating your emotional intelligence. Key ingredients. So I urge you to be inquisitive, to ask good questions, not about what's somebody else's business, because it's none of your business, somebody else's business. Yeah. But you want to ask question of how can I elevate my emotional intelligence, and how come I didn't make good enough progress? By now I would have liked to make better progress, and how can I make better progress in elevating my emotional intelligence? They will be a good question to ask, right? You want to add something to that, Randy?
Nope, that sounds good.
All right, all right. So the one of the most important, I think this should be number one, and what's going to hinder emotional intelligence is guilt and shame. There are so many institutions and so many environments that are what's the verb here, what's the terminology, that are encouraging guilt and shame. um, and this leads you to suppress your emotional intelligence, to suppress your emotions, and to feel unworthy. Now that's not right. Everybody's worth something. um, and then when you feel unworthy because of guilt and shame, a lot of environment can a lot of environment there's so this is manipulation. When somebody inflicts guilt and shame, or within that environment, that is this is very toxic to have guilt and shame as an outcome of the environment. um, and when you begin to feel unworthy, you begin to inhibit the emotional intelligence development. Yeah. And you want to do something about the guilt and shame. So um, we don't want to focus too much on the guilt and the shame because they're just so lower on a scale. We all have guilt and shame. We all have done poorly in school and being scolded by the teacher, and who knows what else. Yeah, we had mishap with our siblings, and we were scolded by the parents. So we all have a little bit. There is such thing as healthy guilty and healthy shame. Like you don't want to take your clothes off and be all naked in public because that's against the law, and you should be ashamed to do that. So there is a healthy aspect to it. But to have an environment promote guilt and shame, um, I don't know. There's something to question, and something to be inquisitive about it, and something to question that type of, why is this environment promoting guilt and shame, and what can you do about it? How can you elevate your emotional intelligence so therefore guilt and shame is, they're not yours, they're not going to touch you, because you already know that you're not going to walk all naked in public, because it's just, there's not even a thought occurring, a thought. There's a silly example, but it's an example. Randy?
Yeah, um, it's a challenging topic because guilt and shame, they're not they're not good motivators for much of anything, and it has to do with, there should be some, should we feel guilty at times? I guess we should. I mean, I do, and I think most people do, for doing things that, if I say the wrong thing to somebody, or if I'm not real, if I um, if I do something that goes against my values. The the thing that is interesting is trying to figure out what is normal guilt and shame, quote unquote, and what's toxic guilt and shame. And to me, toxic guilt and shame is that which guilt and shames you for something you have no control over, not your actions, but your who you are. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of guilt because uh, their 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 normal their thoughts, feelings, who they are is judged, and um, that becomes more toxic. That becomes more damaging than just what would be normal guilt and shame. We feel guilty when we do wrong stuff. Well, who determines what's wrong? That becomes one of the issues. And in this country, it's wrong if you, in this country, it's wrong. Like you said, if you walk down the street naked screaming, that's wrong in the sense that it upsets society's stable stuff. You go to
Mhm.
another country, and what's wrong? It's wrong if a woman's driving a car in some countries. In some countries that we have a very close relationship with, that we give money to, and back and forth, it's wrong to be a homosexual. It's against the not only is it against the law, it's punishable by death. And so, it becomes very tricky on what's right and what's wrong. And a lot of people depend on their spiritual beliefs and their ideas. And I'm just talking about spiritual belief and ideas about to help them determine that. But the thing is, Carmen, I have said this many times, and I'll say it one more time, then I'll shut up. Uh, One of the things that I am so wary of, and I still am, I catch myself falling into the trap. But whenever, and I, and this may offend some people, but whenever anybody says, "I know the truth," everyone else is wrong, but I know what's right, and I know what the truth is, then that's a bad sign to me. Even if they're coming from a pulpit, my father was a minister, and even if they're on the pulpit and they're banging the pulpit and this is what's right, or wherever they're at, and this is what's right, and this is what's in the Bible, and this blah 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 blah. Well, I just don't. I think we just have to be very careful about when people say, "I know the truth," and no one else does, but I know what the truth is. Jim Jones knew what the truth was in Jonestown years ago, and and his truth was 900 and something people, including children, should kill themselves. So yeah, we have to be very. David Koresh knew the truth. He spoke the truth. Well, what 30, 40 people died. So anyway, okay, I'll shut up. But that's my concern about guilt and shame.
Yeah, but you bring out a good point, because this everything that you said goes into the fear of punishment. So when we are afraid of being punished for elevating our emotional intelligence, because when we elevate emotional intelligence, there is no wrongdoing. When we are emotionally intelligent, in with emotional intelligence, the right and wrong is not even a question. Respecting other is not even a question. Getting along with other, including diversity, inclusion as opposed to exclusion, it's not even a question. It is just what emotional intelligence is. So fear of punishment, even fear of judgment, um, they're going to deter that diminish the emotional intelligence. And because when and oftentimes we fear divine is going to punish us, and instead of loving the divine, we're going to have divine punishment. So these are two polar opposites. So keep in mind, the healthy fear of punishment, there is a healthy fear of punishment. Don't break the laws. Yeah, drive safely, drive in a lane, don't break the laws, because you're going to be punished if you break the law. So that's a healthy sense of a fear of punishment, right? But to be punished because you have certain emotional experiences or certain thoughts or behavior that lead to emotional suppression, that is not healthy. Now, emotional intelligence doesn't call for you to express all of your emotions, because you want to respond in an emotionally appropriate manner, not react and be triggered by all sorts of emotions. So Here, emotional intelligence helps you, teaches you how to respond versus react. But fear of punishment, of expressing to someone, I feel a certain way when that happens. I have not used the word you. I have not I have not attacked a person, their identity. I just talked about me. I feel a type of way when an event happens. So emotionally intelligent stated. Yeah. So there are ways to communicate and to address the emotional needs in such a manner that doesn't attack the other person, that is not the other person's fault. It's not always the other person's fault. Sometimes other people are at fault, but not all the time, right? And we cannot control other people's behavior, but we can control our own behavior. I'm gonna add something to that, Randy.
Correct. When I was doing marriage and family counseling, the number one habit that's had to stop immediately, that we worked on immediately, was to blame someone else. And it's very challenging. It takes a lot of desire to. We live in an adversarial society many times. There are a lot of lawyers in this country. And in an adversarial society, in a violent society, then other people are wrong and we're right. And that that type of thinking may work, you know, in a courtroom and may win somebody a court case. But in terms of human relationships, in terms of one-on-one personal relationships, which is what you're talking about, Carmen, of course, it's highly toxic and destructive because it means that I'm off the hook, but you're the problem. And it took a lot of work for a lot of people to move past that simple stage. And you're right. One of the techniques to do it is to use the word you instead of me instead of you. And I when I was doing therapy, I literally had to have spouse here, partner one there, partner two there, and you talk to me, and I'll talk to that partner to keep them from saying pointing the finger. Because when you point the finger to someone, they're just going. People are going to respond defensively. They're not going to hear it. It's very rare that somebody goes, "You're right. I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong, and you're right." And let's pay Mr. Randy and go home. That just never happened.
Yes, yes, you're correct. And it is emotional intelligence teaches us to admit when we have done not according to higher standards of emotional intelligence. Let's not call it wrong, but when we could have done better. And when we begin to admit that, we just gain so much power over that, and it's uplifting, it's empowering the other, it's validating the other. Yeah, of course I could have done better. Let's talk about how can we do better. And this is, when it comes to relationship, right? But another big factor that it will inhibit the development of emotional intelligence is inhibition of natural emotions. I've been talking about the amygdala left and right. And Randy has had enough of hearing about the amygdala for a while. He is saturated with hearing the word amygdala. Well, um, the limbic system is architected to protect and defend you. But when we get into irrational um, reaction, um, that's it's not healthy. But then when it comes to the inhibition of natural emotion, we need to understand what natural emotions are. Anger, it's a natural emotion, but you're not going to express your anger all the time and on everybody. You're going to behave yourself, and you're going to address it in an emotionally intelligent manner after you calm down all of the emotional arousal. And then fear, it's a natural normal emotion, but not fear of punishment, that some sort of God is going to punish you because you are curious about something, whatever. I'm not going to get into too many details over here. I'm going to let Randy take the lead on that. He's doing a good job on that. But when we inhibit natural emotions, um, repressing emotions, it's not the way to go. And I am teaching feelfulness, feel a feeling by choice. And by no means that means suppressing your emotions. Quite the opposite. Learn how to feel a feeling by choice. And when you feel anger, or when you feel fear, or when you feel whatever negative emotion, sadness, feel it. I encourage everybody, go ahead and feel it, but not forever, right? Because something triggered you and you're either angry or afraid or sad. Something triggered you because of all of the experiences that were stored in the limbic system. And once you understand that you were triggered, then you can do something about it. Go ahead and feel it. I provide so many tools, thought feeling tools, to help with triggering this natural emotions. And it doesn't take you more than 3 or 4, not even 10 seconds to go ahead and feel it, as opposed to suppress it. And when I say feel it, I don't say expressing it. I don't say yelling at someone because you're angry. Yeah, you yell at someone when there is a need to, when save your life, call for help. Um, Someone is about to get hurt, and then you call for other people to help. And there's other instances to which yelling is appropriate, um, but not when you're triggered into anger and then throw your anger on other people through yelling. And so there's that, inhibiting this natural emotions. Randy, you want to add something to this?
A lot of that comes from the. I say a lot of it. I think a lot of it comes from the belief that certain parts of our society should act certain ways, feel certain ways. It's a uh, it's it's an old work. It's an old belief that goes back that men should be men and women should be women, and it's having a resurgence on the internet. There's a there's a whole massive movement on the internet called the manosphere, where men are supposed to be this very weird version of what they think the past was, where men were men and women were women. And I've listened to a couple of the YouTube videos about this, and yeah, men are not supposed to be. If you're upset as a man, then you're a baby, or even worse than being a baby, you're what? You're a woman. You're a female.
Wow,
And
you're a
in that
wuss.
world, yeah, you're a wuss. You're just like
Mm-hmm.
a woman.
Mm-hmm.
There was an interview that was done with this is the president you voted for, Carmen. So excuse me for mentioning, but Donald Trump, uh, and I can't remember the guy's name. He's the guy who was kicked off Fox. Uh, I'm
Okay,
blank.
don't mention his name. The guy that was famous and was kicked off. Okay, he talked
Yeah,
a lot of bad things. Okay.
and he said he was talking to Trump, and he called one of the other reporters a fussy little man. He's just a fussy little man,
Mm.
and you know that's code word for he's like a fussy little woman. He's just like a little woman, and that's the worst insult. Anyway, my point being is that there's a more enlightened movement that promotes people having emotions, including men, and that for men to suppress those feelings and to act like that to be a real man, you never are scared, you're never fearful, you're never upset, you never have those womanly. You're never scared. You're never upset about anything. You need to do what you need to do and shut up and be a man and go about. That's a very toxic view of what humanity is, and it almost got us into World War III many times. I grew up in that era, and that kind of macho, that type of attitude is very toxic to general society, in my opinion. So, yeah, I believe that emotional intelligence came from the belief that we should be vulnerable and open to how we feel. But if you're a guy, that in some worlds that means that you're weak, and it's a shame. It's a shame that persists because there's no truth to it.
Correct. That there is no truth, and men and women equally, they have natural emotions. It's just natural emotions, and some of these natural emotions, I'm going to read some of them. The basic emotions are fear, anger, sad, calm, happy, strong. There's more negative than there are positive. And in within the anger and the fear, in the fear arena, a natural emotion that has to do, it's fear-based, would be insecure, nervous, panic, worry, shock, stress. And that goes further to anxious, skeptical, overwhelmed, tension, paranoid, confused. It's all fear-based. Yeah. And if we look at natural emotions over the sadness that have sad at the base, would be hurt, weak, lonely, neglected, ashamed, isolated, with the next level being rejected, hopeless, betrayed, hopeless again. I don't know why hopeless again. Just was, well, unmotivated and disappointed. So these are natural emotions. But what happens with these natural emotions, we need to understand that we have choices to not indulge in these emotions for too long, right? Because another chapter of what emotional intelligence is not is limited emotional vocabulary. Yeah. So emotional vocabulary and getting familiar with different type, with normal emotions of normal people. I believe Abraham Maslow wrote the book, if I'm not mistaken, Emotions of Normal People. When we have a limited emotional vocabulary, this does not encourage a diverse emotional vocabulary. Like I just expressed a bunch of emotions that are fear-based, or a bunch of emotions that are sad-based. Yeah. But this will impede individuals from accurately identifying and expressing their emotions. Yeah. And when we understand emotions are normal, but throwing out emotions on others is not. We're only supposed to react and snap when our life is in danger. If someone insults you and they said, "Oh, that's such an ugly blouse you're wearing," just go, "Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your 2 cents. You're not supposed to snap because someone didn't like your blouse. Now, mind you, they are inconsiderate to say something like that. Their emotional intelligence is very low for them to say something like that to you. That is a fact, but don't react to it. Just let them be who they are. You keep on going and elevate your emotional intelligence, and eventually you will lift them up somehow, because all of the emotionally intelligent, developed people that have elevated their emotional intelligence, they behave as such, they demonstrate emotional intelligence, and other people see that. See, you don't just do that for yourself. You might be selfish, but you actually you end up providing a service to those around you only by elevating your emotional intelligence. And if we are to look at another emotion, the emotion of anger, because today's topic is what emotional intelligence is not. So anger is going to go into rage, into annoyed, bitter, hateful, grumpy, jealous. There is a lot of hate that has been going on in the United States, and a lot of violence due to hate. And now you have business establishment, they have a little notes that said that hate is not tolerated in this establishment, and if you behave with hate, then you're going to be escorted out. Really, in this country, we need to display that kind of sign in a business and establishment, like in a medical facility. I went for a blood draw, and they had the sign, no hateful way, or whichever it was worded. I was a bit surprised, but these are the times that we live in. So then we take anger to the other level, which would be frustrated. Well, frustrated, it's good to be frustrated when you haven't achieved something that you were supposed to achieve and you know that you can. So frustrated can be quite positive, but don't let that take you down. Aggravated. I get aggravated with technology. I didn't know aggravated is part of anger. Oh, there you go. Oh, technology aggravates, but just for a little bit, because then I figured out. Disgust, when you're disgusted, aggressive. Oh my God, anger goes a lot. Anger and aggression, they go hand in hand. Hostile or irritated. So these are some examples of natural emotions, right? It's not about you suppressing these emotions, but feeling them properly, not reacting, not blaming others, and then managing them properly, right? Managing. And when you begin to elevate your emotional intelligence, all of these negative natural emotions, they're not going to stick by you anymore. They're just not going to be there. You are not going to experience this negative emotions as often, as many, and if you do, they're going to be very, very short-lived, because you're going to recognize, oh, I'm frustrated. Oh, I'm aggravated with technology. And then when I notice myself being aggravated with technology, you click on it and things don't happen. But you just clicked on it and it's supposed to you're supposed to respond to the command. Well, then I start laughing at it. Yeah. But it's something I developed this release of tension, and I acknowledge I'm aggravated. It's not a whole lot I can do about the technology. If it doesn't want to reply to my clicking on it, good luck to me. I can close the software and restart, and then take it from there, because that's that. Want to add something to that, Randy?
Yeah, you're saying
So now
that
technology.
it's putting it in perspective.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should be irritated, you
I should
should
be
be
irritated,
angry,
right?
but feel it, manage it. I don't want you to suppress these emotions,
Well,
but I don't want you to throw your emotions on other
managing
people.
it, managing it is putting it in an adult perspective. That this is frustrating me. I can't think. I'm gonna step away, as opposed to banging your hands on the. And I'll give you. I can. I'll tell a very brief story about how I saw that being manifested. It was during some EMDR training and trauma treatment, and
Mhm.
there was a man who was very, very, very angry at his father, hated him, and his father was abusive and an alcoholic, and he had a lot of reasons to be angry and hateful towards him. But it was influencing the client's relationship with his own children. He was starting
Yes.
to act like his father, and he wanted to get past that. And so they did some trauma treatment on him, and they recorded it. So that's what I saw. And one of the interesting things I saw, he remembers. He went back to one of his earliest memories of his father, and he was This has to do with shame and guilt also, but he remembers his father coming in to him taking a bath, and he was touching himself. He was playing with himself, masturbating, sort of. And the father went berserk and started screaming and yelling. And he had that memory of this towering monster towering over him, scaring him to death. And he was just a kid. I mean, he was, I don't remember his age, but he was in a childhood. And it was a horrible, terrible memory from him. And it was the beginning of his hatred towards his father. Well, after the treatment, and after he went through that, he took on a different perspective of it. And what he realized was that his father had become a father when he was 22 or so. So this person standing over, or 21, maybe 2021, he was a very young man as a father. So this man standing over the tub, screaming at him, drunk, screaming at him, shaming him, guilting him, was probably about 24 or 25. He was a kid. He was not this tall, towering, 7 foot tall monster from hell. He was a 25-year-old drunk, very messed up guy. 25
Mhm.
as a kid.
Yeah.
And that helped him understand and put perspective on his anger. It didn't excuse the father. It didn't say the father was right or the father was justified or good for the father or the father um, had no responsibility in it. It just said the client, was just able to put an adult perspective on it. That this, I have been angry at a person who was very troubled, did not want kids, was very young and stupid, and did some very dumb things. And I can get on with my life now. So that was a very good demonstration to me about somebody coming to emotional intelligence, as opposed to hanging on to anger and hatred towards somebody who might have deserved it. I'm not going to judge them, but was inhibiting and keeping somebody from having a happy life, basically.
Yes, yes, and you bring up such a good story, Randy, because a lot of people look at therapy as something to be ashamed of, guilty and ashamed of. One of that there's your emotional intelligence, and that there's your emotional health, and the in the therapeutic context, you are able to help this client change his beliefs and his values, which they are so rooted so deeply, yeah, about an experience that he had. So when And he was able to begin to think about forgiveness and allow forgiveness to begin to happen, right? And obviously the fact that he doesn't want to be like his father, there's something to be applauded for, but recognizing that his father did the best he could with what he had available, and like you said, not even drunk and not very don't want to say the word, to come to that realization, indeed is a elevating your emotional intelligence. So that's where therapy is not for mentally ill people. Therapy and hypnosis is not for mentally ill people again. And I'm surprised you didn't bring out the word hypnosis. Usually you're the one bringing out the word hypnosis. So, but
I did have something to say about it, about
all right,
hypnosis.
all right, we got to say, but things like this that happen in childhood, they leave such an imprint in the limbic system, and we need a different kind of experience to remove it from that, so it's not going to stay in the reactionary mode, right? um, and therapy is for normal people. Therapy is for people that want to grow. And go ahead and add, Randy, what were you going to say?
Um, well, part of emotional intelligence is, as much as we can, and I can't do it 100% of the time. I'm unable to. I'm sorry, the screen popped on. I'm unable to uh, do this 100% of the time. I'm happy if I can do it 75. But it's putting yourself in another person's shoes. And in hypnosis, there's a type of thing. This is not done for everyone, but some people respond very well to it. It's where the hypnotist has the person say I have got a lot of anger, say that I've got a lot of guilt. The the therapist puts, the hypnotist puts part of my guilt in another person or another entity, and I'm able to have a conversation with it in a trance. That sounds weird, and I'm trying to make it not sound so weird. But
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say is that it helps in trauma victims. Sometimes in hypnosis, a client can have a conversation with somebody that they're angry with, and
Mm-hmm.
they can also in the trance be in that, switch chairs and go to the other chair and talk back as that person.
Yes,
And it's
like
very
gestalt, similar to gestalt.
it's an old Gestalt therapy technique. It used to be called the two chair work,
Mm-hmm.
where yeah, it's the same, but it's done can be done in a trance,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very powerful and
Yes.
very useful. So if somebody comes in and they're really struggling with, they can't get along with their mother, for instance, or father, but say the mother, they're constantly fighting. They live next door. They're Romanian, so they're going to be living next door to each other forever and ever. And they fight like hell. And but they go to these giant Romanian celebrations and they have a good time. And they all dress up in their costumes, in their folk costumes. But when they get home, they start screaming at each other. So the Romanian woman comes to Carmen and says, "My mother screams at me all the time." Well, Carmen, as a hip, is that kind of accurate, Carmen?
Kind of so that you've been very cute and funny now, but it's okay. It's because we only address Americans and Romanians here. That's it. Other, it pertains to other cultures too, but we're gonna stick with Romanians and Americans. Go on, go on.
So they come to Carmen and they say, uh, I live next door to my mother and she screams at me all the time. What can I do?" And Carmen can in a very skilled trance, help that person see where her mother's coming from. And that can be very healing. And I know for myself, it always, my own father was a preacher and he had a lot of issues and he was very angry and he was one of the kind that you're talking about, Carmen, that if if they preach what down here in the deep south, deep deep south of this country is called hellfire damnation, hellfire and damnation sermons, which is if you do one thing wrong and you're not sorry about it, you're going you can burn in hell forever. And have you ever burnt yourself on the stove? Well, think about that for eternity, young man. Blah 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 blah. That was my style. That was my father's style of preaching, and um, it took me some time to understand where he was coming from, and I only could do that by understanding where he was coming from, by trying to understand him and put myself in his shoes. I'm lucky if I can do that 75% of the time. I'm happy if I do it 75. I'm lucky if I do it 50. It's a real skill. It really takes the challenge, even as a therapist.
All right, that's a very good story, and that's very good point. So the next chapter on what emotional intelligence is not is being dependent on external validation. And we have been so conditioned to depend on external validation. We are, as children, we depend on a parent to validate, are we walking right? Are we driving the bike right? Are we saying the right words? Are we pronouncing the words right? Then we go to school. Are we doing the homework right? So we have been conditioned to to behave as parents or teachers or ministers or priests say. Yeah, some sort of rules. And those rules are in place for a good reason, because we can just behave whatever and break all kinds of rules and hurt people's feelings and step on people and mistreat them. That's not emotional intelligence. But when if we depend too much on external validation, and we are seeking validation or approval from a higher authority, then people begin to struggle with developing a strong sense of self-awareness. Yeah, and I have clients that they're asking me for validation, and I'm guiding them back to themselves. I'm guiding them back to their values, to their beliefs. I'm using emotional intelligence as a good enough guide of what would be emotional intelligence, but not everybody is emotional intelligent. So then would be, what would be their choice in that particular manner, right? I don't, like, someone needed me to validate their decision, and it was a real big life-changing decision. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to be part of why they decided so, but I guided them to all of the resources they need to make the decision, and let that decision be their own. And also within this decision they needed to make, there was such a strong fear of higher authority. There was such a strong fear of punishment. They were going to be punished by God if they make the decision and take the next step in their life. And so many people decide so nowadays that they're talking about divorce. I mean, divorce is just, it's such a high rate, right? And which is better, which is healthier, to stay in a marriage where you're abused and you lost your sense of self and or to just, I don't know. I don't know. So this is an individual decision where we get to guide them to resources, um, for them to make their own decision, stating what's healthy, what's not healthy, because you'll be surprised in all kinds of marriages what people will agree with. And even though it's not highly emotionally healthy, maybe it doesn't bother them all that much. Maybe they're a bit more detached. So, who is to say what is right and wrong in a marriage other than those who participate in it, right? So, if someone comes to me and said, I'm not sure, well, let's get you into the closest that we can get you to be sure, right? What are your values? What are your beliefs? What's important to you? What are your needs? Are your needs covered? Do you have needs you're not aware of? And so on and so on. What are your aspirations? What motivates you? What are your goals? So that's a lot to explore, right? So, um, depending on external validation is important, but to depend on it and lose your sense of self and lose your self awareness and your identity. I mean, I grew up in a country that individual identity it didn't exist. I moved to this country, and after many years, I began to understand that we as humans have an identity and we have a right to our identity, not just to our cultural identity, right? Not just to our national identity, but to our self identity, right? Behaving with all respect towards others and all the empathy, we have a right to our identity. So, um, that's something that still people struggle with, needing external validation to know who they are. Yeah. So, mm, Randy, what do you want to add on that?
Well, yeah, that that make makes have much value to add to it, other than just to kind of tag tag on that we live in an age where external validation is toxic, and I know everybody blames social media for everything, and the next earthquake we have is going to be blamed on social media, and I just but there's some validity to that. When I deep dip into social media, um, it's so uh, it's so based on external validation. What people post, do you like?
Mhm.
How look how pretty, especially for women. Look how pretty I am. Look how
Mhm.
smart I am. For men, the ones I've seen is look how macho I am. Look how tough I am, and it's it's very toxic. And yes, if the more we rely on that,
The ones I've seen is
the
look how much
harder
it's very
harder
tough.
life can be.
Yeah, yeah. You bring
And,
out a good.
oh, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, one of the ways that's it's not just changing our mind about it. It's also hypnosis can help with something like that. It can help understand because those thoughts come from somewhere. The need for validation, the need to feel smart, to feel macho, to feel tough, to feel pretty, to all that need that comes from somewhere, and hypnosis can help find out where it's coming from and resolve it.
You're right. You're so right about it, because with hypnosis we get to access your deeper values and beliefs, and see, I do they still serve you, right? Are they providing a benefit to you? Because there's a lot of values and belief we grew up with that no longer serve us. They're not good for us anymore, right? Like, I don't believe in external validation. I believe in mutual respect, cooperation, collaboration. But whether somebody validates me or not, it's not going to alter my sense of identity, but I have worked on the sense of identity a long time, and I worked hard on this sense of identity. I grew up in a culture where there was no sense of identity. I mean, everybody who was a senior, either older than you or had a title, knew better than you, and you were supposed to just bow. I grew up in communism, right? Um, don't get me wrong, there's good things about growing up in communism, the sense of community and collaboration, it was there, and it's a lot of compassion, but no sense of individual identity. And even here, when I interact with some Romanians, that still they have not developed the sense of identity, the sense of this is who I am, I respect you, you respect me. Um, they it's hard for them to have that concept because they never grew up with, right? And if they don't go about elevating their emotional intelligence, if they don't go about personal growth, emotional health, emotional intelligence, a spiritual growth, they're not going to understand the concept. And they're not going to necessarily agree, they're not going to validate your identity. So if you have a healthy sense of identity, you're emotionally intelligent, and you treat everyone with respect, compassion, empathy, you do behave and demonstrate all of the emotionally intelligent requirements, you don't need external validation. And if somebody asks you, well, why this? Well, I don't have to explain anything to you. How can I help? Yeah, diverse this, because when somebody asks you why this, why that just to attack your identity, and just to for you to fall into depending upon or wanting their validation, um, shift gears. Shift gears, give them the respectful answer, and then ask them, how can I help? That's going to be very confusing to them, because they're expecting they're there to admonish you, they're there to scold you, they're there to tell you you haven't followed some sort of rules. But if you shift it around, then you're going to demonstrate respect to them. And who knows, maybe that's going to change the trajectory of their life. Maybe that's going to realize that, oh, I'm not supposed to be saying that. That's not a good thing to say, right? All right, so the next chapter on what emotional intelligence is not is us versus them. In exclusive or judgmental attitudes, these are promoted in sort of many different environments. This mentality contribute to a lack of understanding, a lack of empathy. It reduces empathy and reduces the understanding toward people with different backgrounds. And your background doesn't have to be as different as being from a different country, or being from a different culture, or being from a different religion. It doesn't have to be as large, as significant. You can just have a different background, like earlier I explained, having a sense of individual identity, of knowing who you are, right? So and this mentality of us versus them, that's not easily going to go away, especially with what has happened in the consciousness of USA since the insurrection. It became us versus them, as something that America didn't quite have that. I mean, it was just, the Democrats and the Republicans, and we're not gonna do politics now. But it was just that, and it provided a good balance, right? With a lot of people didn't agree with right, a lot of people didn't agree with left. That's not the point. But it's at insurrection, it became such a us versus them mentality that it poisoned the consciousness, and it begins to um, get absorbed in the consciousness of the people. And I'm seeing enough of us versus them mentality, and it breaks my heart. I understand it. I know where they're coming from, and I'm just gonna choose to express empathy towards them, but at the same time, not allow them to alter me or to put me down. As soon as someone tries to put me down, that's going to be addressed respectfully, emotionally intelligent, but addressed. Want to add something, Randy?
No, I think that says it very well. We are, yeah, I think we're in a more divided world than it's been in a long time, unfortunately. And what is particularly difficult for me to grasp is that we're so divided when we have so much in this country. There are people trying to cross, and I don't mean from South America, I don't mean from Mexico, but in other side of the world, there are people trying to leave horrible countries, and they're being shot down by soldiers in water in cold blood. They have nothing. They literally have. So it's just kind of, you know, it's you just wonder about what's gone wrong because we have so much here um, to be thankful for. Um, yeah, yeah. So it's
Yeah,
it's
it's a heavy topic. Yeah, it's a heavy topic. Yeah. Okay, one of the last part, not quite last, of what emotional intelligence is not, it would be pressure to conform. The pressure to conform is prioritizing conformity to a specific set of norms and behaviors. And I'm not talking about the laws. Laws are there. We're not going to break the laws. That's just clear cut, right? But outside of that, prioritizing conformity to a specific set of norms and behavior is going to discourage people from expressing their authentic emotions if their authentic emotions are not aligning with these norms. Well, guess what? Um, a lot of your emotions are not going to align with those norms. And Randy talked about it earlier about men not being allowed to have emotions. Well, emotions are for normal people. Having emotions and expressing them, it's a different story, and blaming your emotions on others, it's a different story. But having emotions is natural. Yeah. So what we want to do, we want to learn to manage emotion. We want to learn emotional intelligence. We want to elevate emotional intelligence. Um, and I'm going to add a photo of the circle of, there's a good photo with um, three levels of emotions, what I read from earlier, that is going to help us identify some of these emotions. And, and part of self-awareness is being able to identify something. And when you identify an emotion that doesn't serve you any well, you can do something about it. And sometimes you don't necessarily have to label everything because some of the emotions are so similar with each other, like frustrated and aggravated. It's kind of almost sort of the same thing. When I get aggravated with technology that things don't happen, I'm also frustrated at the same time. So it's kind of, kind of the same. But you don't always have to label, but it's good to have this available so you see that they exist and they are natural. But what's not natural is to throw it on others and to blame others. Yeah. So self-awareness, self-reflection, self-responsibility elevate your emotional intelligence, and don't suppress your questioning and being inquisitive. Guilt and shame have no room in emotional intelligence other than don't break the laws. Yeah, other than the healthy, don't break the laws and don't step on other people and don't hurt other people's feelings. Don't discount other people of being lower than you, because nobody's better than anybody. Nobody's lower than anybody. It's just their titles might be different, their responsibility might be different, but as human beings, we are all of value, right? So don't be afraid of God punishing you, right? Because God is loving. And if you begin to love God a little more and have conversations with God, then sooner or later, well, it depends on the amount, the level of the level and the amount of fear that you have about God's punishing you. Sooner or later, it will diminish that fear. Just have love for the God of your choice. Love your God. Hopefully it's a good God, and have conversations with that, and fulfill your spirit with that. Let it be nurturing to you. God and divine is supposed to be nurturing to you, is supposed to be helping you, not to be there of fear of punishment. Well, we have laws over here that you better be afraid of breaking the law, because no breaking the law. I don't care how emotionally intelligent you are, no breaking the law, right? um, and then understand that there are natural emotions. There are emotions are natural. What we do with these emotions is a different story. So being emotionally intelligent, you learn what to do, how to manage these emotions, expand your emotional vocabulary. And I'm going to present that image that it's a circle, and it has several pies to it. No, they're not cherry nor apple pies. It's just a image. It's a two-dimensional pie. And then depending on external validation, sometimes you want to um, um, you want to collaborate with others, and you want to have their collaboration and cooperation, but having your identity depend on external validation, whether you are good enough, um, whether you are beautiful, whether you are slim, how heavy are you, have you gained weight. God help us if you gain 20, 30 pounds. Women do that, men do that, hormones do that. So you don't need all of the external validation to be beautiful, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and beauty comes from the inside. And when you are emotionally intelligent, you're going to radiate beauty automatically, right? And then that's the mentality of us versus them. Maybe a little bit less of that. There's always going to be us versus them. Let that be in sports. Always going to be teams, and let it be entertaining to you. But you believing in being engaged in us versus them. No, no. You want cooperation and collaboration. It's more emotionally intelligent and creates more ease in your life. And pressure to conform limit that pressure to conform to conforming to not breaking the laws, right? Conforming to not breaking someone's heart. Yeah. Conforming to not stepping on other people, conform to healthy behavior, conform to emotional intelligence, but not anything that discourages your identity, your authenticity. And as always, stay curious. Curiosity does not kill the cat. No, I have kitty cats. they haven't died of curiosity. They've gotten in plenty of trouble because of their curiosity, but curiosity doesn't kill the cat. Lack of curiosity will kill your emotional intelligence, but be curious, because curiosity is such a key element of emotional intelligence. And it's, well, healthy curious. Yeah, I don't mean being curious of what your neighbor is doing and picking and being a, what's that word, when you keyhole, when you whatever the word, I don't even want to say the word. No, don't do that. No, that's not the kind of curiosity I'm talking about. I'm talking about the healthy curiosity, allowing you to explore your emotions and understand the emotions of others and understand where your emotions are coming from. And this immediately is going to take you into valuing your values, looking at your values, looking at your beliefs, your motivation, your priorities, and be beautiful. Keep on being beautiful, radiating your authenticity with respect for all life, all of life. All of life. If we do respect, 100% respect for all life, then we cover it all. RESPECT for emotional intelligence. Randy? I think Randy's frozen. I mean, not Randy as being frozen, but his technology. Randy's technology has frozen the screen. So thank you for tonight. We'll be back soon, and let us know your questions, and be good to yourself and be emotionally intelligent. Good night.